wife invited me to a business dinner with a Japanese client. I kept quiet and pretended I didn't understand Japanese, but then I heard him say something that made me freeze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They thought I was just a helpless old man, a burden waiting to expire. They didn't know that behind my trembling hands and vacant stare, my mind was as sharp as a blade. And they certainly didn't know that 40 years ago, I wasn't just a businessman. I was a Marine stationed in Okinawa, and I understood every single word of the murder plot they were discussing right in front of my face. Before I tell you how I turned their trap into their prison, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps share these stories with people who might be going through the same thing. And let me know in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to love you the most? I want to read your stories. The sound of a lacquered chopstick hitting the expensive porcelain plate rang out like a gunshot in the quiet, dim atmosphere of the omakase restaurant. It was my chopstick. My damn hand had spasmed again. I watched helplessly as the piece of otoro, fatty tuna that cost more than a week's worth of groceries for a normal family, slid off the table and landed on my lap. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, not from anger, but from the humiliation that had become my daily bread for the last 6 months. Ever since the stroke hit me, my body had become a cage. I was Harold Foster. I built half the industrial parks in Chicago. I used to negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts with a handshake that could crush a rock. Now, I couldn't even hold a piece of raw fish without making a mess. Oh, Harold, look at you. The voice beside me was sweet, dripping with a concern that would have fooled anyone else in the restaurant. It was Veronica, my wife. My beautiful 42-year-old wife, who looked like she had just stepped off a runway in Milan. She reached over with a napkin, dabbing at the soy sauce stain on my trousers. Her touch was gentle, but I felt it. I felt the pinch. Just a tiny, sharp pinch on my thigh where the fabric was thin. A reminder. A punishment for embarrassing her. She smiled at the server who rushed over. "My husband is having a bit of a bad day," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "We will need another napkin, please." She turned back to me, her eyes dead cold, while her lips maintained that perfect, loving smile. "Pull yourself together, Harold," she whispered, so low that only I could hear. "Kenji is going to be here in 2 minutes. Do not embarrass me. Do not drool. Just sit there and nod. That is all you are good for now anyway." I wanted to tell her to go to hell. I wanted to stand up, throw the table over, and walk out. But I couldn't. My left leg was still dragging, and my speech was still slurred when I got excited. So I did what I had learned to do. I swallowed my pride. I looked down at my lap and nodded like a scolded child. "I am sorry, V," I mumbled. "My hand, it slipped." "Just keep them on your lap," she hissed, turning away to check her reflection in the darkened window. A moment later, the heavy oak doors of the private dining room slid open. A man walked in. He was young, maybe late 30s, wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had that slicked-back hair and the kind of arrogant walk that screams new money. This was Kenji Sato. Veronica had introduced him to me a week ago as a brilliant tech investor from Tokyo, a man who was going to help modernize Foster Holdings. "Mr. Foster," Kenji said, bowing deeply. His English was heavily accented, almost exaggerated. "It is a great honor to meet a legend of industry. Veronica has told me so much about your strength." He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was weak, clammy. He looked at me with eyes that crinkled in a smile, but there was no warmth there. just the look a butcher gives a cow before the hammer comes down. I nodded, playing my part. "Nice to meet you, son. Please, sit," Veronica said, gesturing to the chair opposite us. We ordered the chef's special course. "I know you will love it." Kenji sat down, adjusting his silk tie. He looked at Veronica, then back at me. I was struggling to pick up my water glass, my hand shaking just enough to make the ice cubes clink against the glass. Clink, clink, clink. The sound of my weakness. And that was when it happened. Kenji turned to Veronica. He didn't think I was listening, or maybe he just didn't care. He assumed, like everyone else, that Harold Foster was just a dumb, rich American who had never stepped foot outside of Chicago except for vacations in Paris or London. He leaned in, picking up his sake cup, and switched to Japanese.
このクソじじはもう死んでいるみたいだな。
I froze. My hand stopped shaking instantly, hovering in midair. I knew that phrase. I knew that tone. This shitty old man looks like he is already dead. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had spent 6 years in Okinawa in the 70s. I wasn't just a tourist. I lived off base. I had a Japanese wife, my beloved Emiko, God rest her soul. We spoke Japanese at home for years before cancer took her. I knew the language of the boardroom, and I knew the language of the gutter. And what Kenji just said was gutter trash. I forced my hand to tremble again. I brought the glass to my lips and took a sloppy sip, letting a little bit of water dribble down my chin. I had to sell it. I had to know more. Veronica laughed, a light tinkling sound that usually charmed my business partners. She answered him, in Japanese. I nearly dropped the glass for real. Veronica spoke Japanese. In 10 years of marriage, she had never mentioned it. She told me she struggled with high school Spanish. But here she was, the syllables rolling off her tongue with a practiced ease. "He is disgusting, isn't he?" she said, her Japanese accented but fluent. "I have to wipe his mouth like a baby. It makes me sick." I sat there, staring at the wall, while my world crumbled. It wasn't just the insults. It was the deception. 10 years. 10 years of lies. Kenji smirked, taking a bite of pickled ginger. "When does the old fool sign the papers? The investors in Tokyo are getting impatient." "I need that access code, Veronica." "Friday," Veronica replied, picking up a piece of sushi with elegant precision. "The lawyers are bringing the power of attorney and the living trust amendments to the house on Friday morning. He thinks he is signing a temporary management agreement to let us handle the day-to-day while he recovers." "And after he signs?" Kenji asked, his eyes narrowing. Veronica didn't even blink. She dipped her sushi in soy sauce, watching the dark liquid soak into the white rice. "After he signs, we stop the medication. I already have the DNR forged. The doctor said with his condition, a secondary stroke is highly likely if his blood pressure spikes. And we have those pills you got from the contact in Shinjuku." The pills. The vitamins she had been giving me every night. The ones that made me feel foggy and weak the next morning. "They are untraceable?" Veronica asked. "Completely," Kenji assured her. "It mimics natural heart failure. By Sunday, you will be the grieving widow of Chicago's richest construction mogul, and we will be on a flight to the Cayman Islands." I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This wasn't just theft. This wasn't just an affair. This was an execution. I looked at them. They were eating, drinking, flirting with their eyes, discussing my murder as casually as they discussed the weather. I looked at the knife the chef was using at the counter. a long, sharp Yanagiba blade. For a split second, I imagined grabbing it. I imagined ending it right there. But I was 72. I had a bad leg, and they were two healthy, ruthless predators. If I made a scene now, they would claim I was having a dementia episode. They would have me institutionalized by tonight, and I would be dead by morning. No, I needed a plan. I lowered my glass. I looked Kenji right in the eye. He didn't see the fire burning in there. He only saw a confused old man. "Is the sushi good, Mr. Sato?" I asked in English, my voice cracking perfectly. Kenji jumped slightly, then recovered his smile. "It is delicious, Mr. Foster. Very fresh." "Good," I said. I pushed my plate away, letting my shoulders slump. "I am tired, V. I think I need to go home soon. My head hurts." Veronica patted my hand again. That same patronizing pat. "Of course, darling. Just let us finish our drinks. You need to rest up for Friday. It is a big day." She winked at Kenji. I looked down at the table, hiding the clenched fist under my napkin. My fingernails were digging into my palm so hard I could feel the skin breaking. Friday. I had 3 days. 3 days to undo 10 years of marriage. 3 days to prove I wasn't the helpless invalid they thought I was. 3 days to save my own life. They thought Harold Foster was finished. They thought the stroke had taken my fight. But they forgot one thing. You don't survive the jungles of business, and you certainly don't survive the Marines by being soft. I took a deep breath, smelling the wasabi and the betrayal in the air. Enjoy your meal, I thought, because it's going to be your last happy memory. The game was on, and unlike them, I knew the rules. The ride back to our estate in the back of the limousine was suffocating. The leather seats were cool against my back, but the air inside felt heavy, thick with the scent of Veronica's perfume and the unspoken toxicity of what I had just witnessed. The partition was up, separating us from the driver, creating a private bubble of deceit. Veronica slid across the seat, closing the distance between us. Her hand, manicured and adorned with the 3-carat diamond I had bought her for our 5th anniversary, came up to rest on my knee. "Kenji really likes you, Harold," she said softly. Her voice was a purr, the same tone she used to convince me to buy vacation homes we didn't need or cars she barely drove. "He thinks you are a visionary. He told me that with his technology and your foundation, the company is going to soar to new heights." I stared straight ahead at the passing streetlights of Chicago. Each light that whipped by felt like a strobe flashing on the wreckage of my life. I wanted to vomit. I wanted to grab her wrist and squeeze it until she dropped the act. I wanted to scream that I knew Kenji wasn't a visionary, but a 2-bit hustler running from the Japanese mob. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I let my head loll to the side, hitting the cold glass of the window. I let my mouth hang open slightly, maintaining the mask of the stroke victim. "Good," I mumbled. "That is good." She patted my knee, satisfied with my dim-witted response. "He is going to help us, Harold. You need rest. You have worked so hard for 50 years. It is time to let the younger generation carry the burden. Kenji and I, we will take care of everything." We passed the old cathedral on State Street. Seeing it triggered a memory so sharp it physically hurt. 10 years ago. That was where we renewed our vows. I remembered Veronica standing there in white lace, tears streaming down her face. She had held my hands, looked into my eyes, and promised before God and our friends that she would love me in sickness and in health. She said I was her rock. She said she would be my shelter when the storm came. I was 62 then, feeling invincible. She was 32, beautiful and seemingly devoted. I thought I was the luckiest man in Chicago. I thought the age gap didn't matter because our souls were connected. What a fool I was. The tears were fake. The vows were just a script. The only thing she was committed to was the balance in my bank account. Now, the storm was here. And she wasn't my shelter. She was the one drowning me. The limousine turned through the wrought iron gates of our estate in Lincoln Park. The house was a masterpiece of Georgian architecture that I had restored with my own hands before the stroke took my dexterity. Now, seeing its dark windows, it didn't look like a home. It looked like a tomb. A very expensive, well-manicured tomb where my wife planned to bury me. The driver opened the door. Veronica gripped my arm, helping me out. To the outside world, she was the picture of a supportive wife, guiding her frail husband up the steps. But I felt the pressure of her fingers. She was dragging me, not guiding me. "Let's get you to bed," she said, checking her watch. "You need your sleep." We entered the foyer. The marble floor echoed with our footsteps. It was quiet. Too quiet. I missed the days when the house was filled with the noise of my first wife's piano playing or the laughter of friends. Now the silence was heavy, broken only by the click of Veronica's heels. She led me into the living room and sat me down in my favorite armchair. "Stay here," she commanded lightly. "I will get your water and your medicine." I watched her walk to the kitchen. My heart began to race. The medicine. For months I had been taking whatever she gave me. Dr. Evans, my physician for 20 years, had prescribed blood thinners and a mild sedative to help me sleep. I trusted Dr. Evans. But lately, the pills Veronica gave me didn't look like the ones in the bottles I used to pick up myself. Every morning for the past few weeks, I woke up feeling heavier. My brain felt like it was wrapped in cotton wool. My limbs felt like lead. I had assumed it was the stroke getting worse. I had assumed my body was just failing. But after tonight, after hearing Kenji talk about the pills from Shinjuku, I knew. It wasn't my body failing. It was an assassination by chemistry. She returned with a crystal glass of water and a small porcelain dish. On the dish sat 2 pills. One was white, which I recognized as my blood pressure medication. The other was blue. A small, innocent-looking blue oval. "Here we go, darling," she said, kneeling beside my chair. "This will help your brain heal. Dr. Evans said it is very important you take this one right before bed." She held the blue pill up to my lips. Her eyes were wide, encouraging. It was the face of an angel serving poison. I opened my mouth. My tongue felt dry. I placed the pill on my tongue. It tasted bitter, metallic. "Drink," she said, lifting the glass to my lips. I took a sip of water. I knew I couldn't swallow it, but if I spat it out, she would know. If I refused, she might force it down my throat, or worse, call Kenji to finish the job tonight. I had to be smarter. I had to use my weakness as a weapon. I tilted my head back, pretending to swallow. And then I triggered it. I forced a cough. A violent, hacking cough that shook my entire frame. It was easy to do. The stress had already tightened my chest. "Oh, Harold, be careful," she said, sounding annoyed rather than worried. I gagged, leaning forward, grabbing the linen napkin from the side table. I buried my face in the napkin, coughing loudly, my body convulsing. In that moment of chaos, While my face was hidden in the white fabric, I spat the blue pill out. I folded the napkin quickly over it, crumpling it in my trembling hand. I took a deep breath, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand, keeping the napkin balled up in my fist. "I am sorry," I wheezed, looking at her with watery eyes. "Went down the wrong pipe." "Did you swallow it?" she asked sharply. I nodded, patting my chest. Yes, I think so. It is down." She stared at me for a second, searching my face for any sign of deception. I kept my mouth slightly open, breathing hard, looking pathetic. She relaxed. "Good," she said. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Go upstairs and get changed. I have some emails to answer. I will sleep in the guest room tonight. I don't want to disturb your rest." That was her code for calling Kenji. I gripped the armrests and hoisted myself up, clutching the crumpled napkin in my left hand like it was a grenade. "Good night, V," I said.
Good night, Harold.
I walked to the stairs. Each step was a battle. I had to drag my leg. I had to keep my back hunched. But inside, my adrenaline was pumping like jet fuel. I made it to the landing, turned the corner, and entered the master bedroom. I closed the door and locked it. I went straight to the bathroom and turned on the faucet, letting the water run loud. Just in case there were bugs in the room, the sound of the water would mask my movements. I leaned over the marble vanity and unfurled the linen napkin. There it was, the blue pill. It was starting to dissolve slightly from my saliva, but it was still intact. I reached into the drawer and pulled out my reading glasses and a small magnifying glass I used for inspecting model ships. A hobby she thought was senile, but actually kept my hands disciplined. I held the pill under the harsh bathroom light. It wasn't a prescription pill. There were no standard pharmaceutical markings, no numbers, no letters. But on one side, faintly stamped into the blue coating, was a symbol. A small, stylized cherry blossom. I stared at it, my blood running cold. I knew that symbol. I had seen it in Okinawa years ago, in the darker back alleys of Naha. It wasn't a pharmaceutical logo. It was a stamp used by underground chemists to mark synthetic opioids. This wasn't medicine. This was a slow-acting neurotoxin mixed with a sedative. It was designed to shut down the central nervous system gradually, mimicking the symptoms of vascular dementia until the heart just stopped. I looked at my face in the mirror. The gray hair, the wrinkles, the droop in my left eye. They were killing me. Every single night, the woman I shared my bed with was feeding me death, smiling while she did it. I flushed the pill down the toilet and watched it swirl away. "You missed this time, Veronica," I whispered to the empty room. I walked back into the bedroom. I didn't get into bed. I went to the closet and pulled out an old shoebox from the top shelf, buried behind winter coats. Inside was a burner phone I had bought 3 months ago when I first started getting suspicious but had been too afraid to use. I turned it on. My hands weren't shaking anymore. It was time to make a call. Not to the police, not yet. I needed someone who understood war. I dialed the number of the only man in Chicago who hated liars as much as I did. "Solomon," I said when the line clicked open. "It's Harold. We have a situation." The war had officially begun, and I was done playing the victim. The house was silent at 6 in the morning. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, listening to the sounds of my wife getting ready in the next room. Veronica was humming. It was a cheerful, light tune that made my stomach turn. She walked into the bedroom, the click of her expensive sneakers on the hardwood floor echoing in the stillness. She leaned over me, and a cloud of expensive perfume washed over my face. It wasn't the smell of someone going to a fitness center. It was the smell of someone going on a date. "Going to the gym, Harold," she whispered, not really caring if I heard her or not. "Sleep tight. Don't wait up." I waited until I heard the heavy front door close and the distant purr of her Porsche fading down the driveway. Then, I threw the covers off. My legs hit the floor, and for the first time in months, I didn't let them tremble. I stood up straight. The cane I had been forced to use leaned against the nightstand. I looked at it with disdain. I left it there. Today, I wouldn't need a crutch. Today, I needed a soldier. I dressed quickly in clothes I hadn't worn since the stroke. A dark wool coat, a flat cap pulled low, and shoes that were meant for walking, not shuffling. I moved through the hallways of my own home like a ghost. I avoided the cameras she had installed in the living room, sticking to the shadows of the servants' corridors. I slipped out the side entrance near the garage. A black sedan was waiting there, the engine idling softly. It wasn't the limousine. It was a nondescript Lincoln, solid and reliable. The window rolled down, revealing the weathered face of Arthur. Arthur had been my driver for 30 years. He was a man of few words, the kind who saw everything and said nothing. He knew Veronica was poisoned long before I did, but he knew his place was to protect me, even from my own blindness. "Mornin', Mr. Foster," Arthur said, his voice rough like gravel. "You look better." I opened the back door and slid in. "Drive, Arthur. We are going to see Solomon." "And Arthur?" "If anyone asks, I was asleep in bed all morning." Arthur met my eyes in the rearview mirror. He didn't smile, but the corners of his eyes crinkled. "I haven't seen you since yesterday, sir. I don't know what you were talking about." We pulled out of the estate, taking the back roads to avoid traffic and prying eyes. The city of Chicago was waking up. The gray steel of the skyline looked like a fortress in the morning mist. I felt a surge of energy I hadn't felt in years. It was the thrill of the hunt. For too long I had been the prey. Now the roles were reversing. Solomon Black's office was in an old brick building in the Loop, the kind with a manual elevator and a lobby that smelled of brass polish and history. Solomon didn't do glass towers and modern art. He was old school. We had served in the same platoon in Vietnam before I was stationed in Okinawa. He had been a sniper. He knew how to wait, how to watch, and when to pull the trigger. I didn't knock. I pushed the heavy oak door open and walked in. Solomon was behind his desk, surrounded by towers of case files. He was 68, bald as an eagle, with glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up, expecting to see a client, or perhaps his secretary. When he saw me standing there, upright, alert, and radiating a cold intensity, he dropped his pen. It rolled across the mahogany desk and fell to the floor. "Harold?" he breathed. "Jesus, Harry. The rumors. They said you were vegetating?" I finished for him, walking over to the leather chair opposite his desk and sitting down without a groan. Losing my mind? Drooling on myself? Solomon took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "That is exactly what they said. Veronica told me she was looking into hospice care. She said you didn't even recognize her anymore." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small plastic bag containing the linen napkin from last night. The blue stain of the dissolved pill was still visible, crusted and ominous. I tossed it onto his desk. She wishes I didn't recognize her, I said. But I see her clearly now, Saul. For the first time in 10 years, I see exactly who she is. Solomon picked up the bag, examining it. What is this? That is my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I said. She calls it vitamins. I call it evidence. I need you to run it. I know you still have contacts at the university lab. I need to know exactly what she is feeding me. Solomon didn't ask questions. He picked up his secure line and dialed a number. He spoke in low, urgent tones, giving instructions. Within minutes, a courier was at the door to take the sample. That was Solomon. Efficient. Lethal. While we waited, I told him everything. I told him about the dinner, the Japanese insults, the plan to kill me on Friday. Solomon listened, his face hardening into a mask of stone. He didn't interrupt. He just poured 2 glasses of scotch from the decanter on his shelf. It was barely 8 in the morning, but this was war council. By the time I finished, the fax machine in the corner beeped. It was the preliminary analysis from the lab. Solomon walked over and tore the paper off. He read it, and his knuckles turned white. He walked back to the desk and slid the paper toward me. You were right to spit it out, Harry, he said, his voice low and dangerous. It is a cocktail. Arsenic in microdoses to weaken the heart walls. And scopolamine. The zombie drug, I said. I knew it. It makes you suggestible, confused, and eventually causes complete memory loss, Solomon explained. Combined with the arsenic, it mimics the symptoms of vascular dementia perfectly. If you had died, no coroner would have looked twice. They would have just seen an old man whose heart gave out. I stared at the paper. Seeing it in black and white made it real. It wasn't just a bad marriage. It was a slow, calculated murder. She is not doing this alone, I said. There is a man. Kenji Sato. Claims to be an investor. Solomon nodded. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder. He slammed it down on the desk. Dust motes danced in the morning light. I know, Solomon said. As soon as you called me yesterday, I started digging. My friends in Tokyo Intelligence owe me a few favors. He opened the file. Inside were photos, not of a boardroom, but of neon lights, crowded clubs, and men with tattoos. Meet Kenji Sato, Solomon said, pointing to a picture of Kenji wearing a flashy suit, surrounded by women in a club in Kabukicho. Or, as he is known in the red light district, Prince Kenji. He isn't an investor, Harold. He is a host. A high-end male escort who targets wealthy older women. I looked at the photos. The arrogance was the same. The smile was the same. He seduced Veronica, I said. It is worse than that, Solomon continued. He didn't just seduce her. He is desperate. Look at the last page. I flipped to the back of the file. There was a police report, translated from Japanese. He owes money, Solomon said. A lot of money. He borrowed 50 million yen from the Inagawa Kai to open his own club, and he gambled it all away. The Yakuza aren't known for their patience. They gave him 3 months to pay up, or he loses his fingers. Or his life. That is why he is here. That is why they are rushing to get your signature on Friday. He needs your money to buy his life back. I closed the folder. A cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a predator who just found the exposed jugular of his enemy. So, I said softly, he is running from the Yakuza. He is terrified of them, Solomon confirmed. If they find out where he is a dead man walking. I stood up, buttoning my coat. I picked up the file and tucked it under my arm. "You know, Solomon," I said, walking to the window and looking down at the street where Arthur was waiting. "I have always admired the Japanese culture. They believe strongly in honor, and they really hate it when someone steals from them."
Someone looked at me, realizing what I was thinking.
"Harold, what are you going to do? You can't just call the police. We need to build a case." "Police?" I turned back to him, my eyes hard as flint. "The police are for justice, Saul. I don't want justice. I want punishment. If Mr. Sato owes a debt to the Yakuza, who am I to stand in the way of a collection agency?" I walked toward the door. "Get the paperwork ready for Friday, Saul. Bring the camera crew. And find me a contact number for the Inagawa-kai branch in Los Angeles. I think it is time I made a business call." I left the office, my cane forgotten in the car, my step light. They wanted a helpless old man. I was about to give them a war. The afternoon sun was streaming through the bay windows of the living room, casting long, sharp shadows across the Persian rug. I sat in my wheelchair, a prisoner in my own home, staring at the dust motes dancing in the light. My body was still, but my mind was racing, replaying the conversation with Solomon, calculating the risks, planning the endgame. I was ready for a fight, but I wasn't expecting the enemy to walk through the front door with a yoga mat and a smile that could cut glass. Veronica came in first, clapping her hands together with a forced enthusiasm that made my teeth ache. "Harold, look who is here to see you. You know how we talked about getting your strength back? Well, I hired the best specialist in the city. He is going to help you with your range of motion." My stomach churned as Kenji Sato walked in behind her. He wasn't wearing his expensive suit today. He was dressed in tight designer athletic wear that showed off his gym muscles, the kind of muscles built for vanity, not for work. He carried a leather bag in one hand and that same arrogant smirk on his face. "Good afternoon, Mr. Foster," Kenji said, his voice dripping with false solicitude. "Veronica tells me your muscles have been very stiff. We're going to loosen you up today." I gripped the armrests of my chair. This wasn't therapy. This was an invasion. He was marking his territory, showing me that he could touch me, hurt me, and control me right in front of my wife. I nodded slowly, letting my head bob weakly. "Hello," I mumbled. Kenji set his bag down on the coffee table right next to me. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell his cologne, a heavy, musky scent that masked the smell of stale tobacco. "Let us start with the arms," he said. He grabbed my right wrist. His grip wasn't therapeutic. It was hard. His fingers dug into the tender flesh between my bones. He lifted my arm, pushing it back, past the point of comfort, past the point of resistance. "Does this hurt?" he asked, smiling. I gritted my teeth, letting a small whimper escape. "Yes, hurts." "Good," he said, pushing it another inch. "That means it is working." "You have to break the stiffness, Mr. Foster. You have to break it to fix it." He was enjoying this. I could see it in his eyes, a sadistic glint. He wasn't trying to heal me. He was testing me. He was seeing how much pain the old man could take before he snapped. Veronica stood by the fireplace, watching. She wasn't horrified. She was smiling. She had a glass of wine in her hand, sipping it as if she were watching a tennis match. Kenji switched to my left arm, the one that had been more affected by the stroke. He twisted my wrist, a subtle motion that sent a bolt of lightning up to my shoulder. It took every ounce of my willpower not to drive my fist into his throat. I knew exactly where to strike. A quick jab to the windpipe, a thumb to the eye. I had learned 17 ways to dismantle a man before breakfast when I was 20 years old. But I couldn't do it. Not yet. Then he leaned in close, his face inches from mine. He looked over his shoulder at Veronica to make sure she was watching, and then he switched to Japanese. Mite miyagare, kono kusatta shita yo. Look at this rotten corpse. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. He was mocking me to my face, using the language I loved, the language of my late wife, to dehumanize me. He continued, his voice low and smooth, still in Japanese. Veronica, omae no shumi wa hontou ni warui na. Konna yatsu to yaru nante. Veronica, you really have bad taste, doing it with a guy like this. Veronica laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound. She didn't understand the exact words, but she understood the tone. She knew he was degrading me, and she loved it. Tell him to push harder, Kenji, she said in English. He has been so lazy lately. Kenji turned back to me. He lifted his hand and patted my cheek. It wasn't a gentle pat. It was a slap. Not hard enough to leave a mark, but hard enough to sting. Hard enough to say, I own you. Good boy, Harold, he said in English. Take the pain. That slap was the catalyst. The rage that exploded in my chest was white hot. It was the fury of a man who had built an empire from nothing. A man who had served his country, being treated like a dog by a two-bit gigolo. My muscles tensed. My right hand, the good one, started to curl into a fist. I was about to lose it. I was about to stand up and end him right there. Consequences be damned. But then I saw his bag. The leather bag on the coffee table. The zipper was slightly open. I remembered the plan. I remembered Solomon's words. We need to know the timeline. We need to know who the contact is. If I fought him now, I would win the fight, but I would lose the war. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the strategist, not just the soldier. I needed to get them away from me, and I needed to get access to that bag. I had to do the one thing that would make them underestimate me forever. I had to destroy my own dignity to save my life. I relaxed my body. I let go of the tension. And then, I let go of my bladder. I forced myself to urinate right there in the chair. The warm, damp sensation spread through my trousers, soaking into the expensive upholstery of the wheelchair. It was the most humiliating moment of my life. I felt the heat rise to my face, tears of genuine shame and frustration pricking my eyes. But I used it. I let the tears fall. I started to cry, a wailing, pathetic sound. Oh no, I sobbed. Oh no. Wet. I am wet. The smell hit the air almost instantly. Kenji froze. He looked down at my trousers, seeing the dark stain spreading. He recoiled as if he had been burned, jumping back 2 feet. "Oh God!" he yelled, his face twisting in disgust. "What the hell?" Veronica dropped her wine glass. It shattered on the hearth, but she didn't care. "Harold!" she screamed. "You disgusting old man! Not on the Persian rug!" She covered her nose, backing away. "I can't touch him," Kenji said, wiping his hands on his pants as if I were a disease. "I am not cleaning that up. That is vile." "Call the maid!" Veronica shrieked, turning and running toward the hallway. "Maria! Maria, get in here, now!" Kenji looked at me one last time, shaking his head. "You are finished, old man," he muttered in Japanese. "You are garbage." He turned his back to me, walking toward the window to get fresh air, trying to distance himself from the smell. This was it, the moment I had bought with my pride. They were both distracted. Veronica was yelling in the hallway. Kenji was looking out the window, holding his breath. I stopped crying instantly. My hand shot out. It was steady. It was fast. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan where I had hidden the device Solomon gave me. It was a small black bug, no bigger than a coin, with a powerful magnet and a long-range transmitter. I leaned forward, ignoring the wetness, ignoring the shame. I reached for the leather bag on the coffee table. My fingers brushed the open side pocket. I slipped the device inside, tucking it deep into the lining where it wouldn't be seen. I pulled my hand back and slumped into the chair, just as Maria ran into the room, followed by a furious Veronica. I started wailing again, playing the part of the senile, incontinent invalid. "I am sorry, V," I cried. I couldn't hold it. Veronica looked at me with pure hatred. "Get him out of here," she hissed at Maria. "Clean him up and burn those pants." Kenji walked over and grabbed his bag. He swung it over his shoulder, completely unaware that he was now carrying a relentless spy. "I am leaving, Veronica," he said. "I can't deal with this smell. I will see you tonight at the hotel." He looked at me with a sneer. "Goodbye, Mr. Foster. Try not to rot before Friday." I watched him walk out the door. Maria was fussing over me, apologizing softly, treating me with the kindness that my own family lacked. I let her wheel me away to the bathroom. As the water ran in the tub, washing away the evidence of my humiliation, I felt a strange sense of calm. The shame was gone. In its place was a cold, hard satisfaction. "Go ahead and run, Kenji. Go to your hotel. Go to your meeting. You think you are carrying your gym clothes, but you are carrying your own death warrant." I closed my eyes and listened to the water. I was clean, and for the first time in a long time, I was in control. The heavy oak door of my private study clicked shut, and I threw the deadbolt. It was a solid sound, a sound of finality that echoed in the silence of the room. This was the one place in the entire estate where Veronica held no dominion. She had tried to get the code from me a dozen times in the last year, claiming she wanted to clean or organize my old files. But I had played the stubborn old man card perfectly. I told her I had lost the combination in the fog of my memory. The truth was, I remembered it better than I remembered my own birthday. This room was my bunker. The walls were lined with cork and heavy mahogany, soundproof decades ago, so I could conduct international business without waking the household. Now, those same walls were the only thing standing between me and the vultures circling outside. I moved to the large desk that dominated the center of the room. It was covered in dust, a testament to my supposed incapacity, but under the layer of neglect lay the tools of my salvation. I pulled open the bottom drawer, bypassing the false bottom I had installed in the 80s, and retrieved the receiver unit. It was a sleek black box, modern military grade, something Solomon had procured for me. I set it on the leather blotter and plugged in the headset. My hands were steady. The tremors that plagued me during the day, the shaking that spilled soup and dropped glasses, were gone. Here, in the dark, I wasn't the invalid. I was the Marine. I was the CEO. I was the hunter. I put the headphones over my ears and adjusted the frequency dial. Static hissed in my ears, white noise that sounded like the ocean. I closed my eyes and turned the knob slowly, filtering through the interference of the city. Then, the signal snapped into place, crystal clear. The first thing I heard was the sound of ice clinking against glass. Then, the ambient hum of an air conditioner. They were at a hotel. I recognized the acoustic signature immediately. It wasn't the Four Seasons or the Ritz. It sounded smaller, tighter. Probably a boutique hotel on the north side where they thought they were invisible. Then came the voices. "You should have seen his face," Kenji was saying. His voice was relaxed, arrogant. When I told him to look at me, he looked like a frightened dog. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. I sat there in the dark, my jaw clenched so hard I thought I might crack a tooth. "He is pathetic," Veronica's voice joined in.
It was a tone I had never heard her use with me. It was loose, unguarded, and dripping with contempt. I had to burn those trousers, Kenji. The smell was unbearable. I don't know how I am going to stomach sitting next to him on Friday. I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. The ceiling was painted with a mural of the night sky, a detail I had commissioned for my first wife. Now, I was staring at those painted stars while my second wife discussed my incontinence with her lover. The conversation shifted. The sounds of glasses being set down, the rustle of fabric, the heavy, wet sounds of kissing. I should have taken the headphones off. Any normal man would have. No one should have to hear their spouse betraying them in high-definition audio. It is a specific kind of torture, a violation that goes deeper than a knife. But I didn't take them off. I forced myself to listen. I needed the pain. I needed to sear this moment into my brain so that when the time came to destroy them, I wouldn't feel a shred of mercy. I listened to their moans, their laughter, the squeak of the hotel mattress. I sat there like a statue, letting the hatred calcify my heart. After what felt like an eternity, the room went quiet again. Then, the click of a lighter, the exhale of smoke. "Friday," Kenji said. His voice was different now. The playfulness was gone. It was tight, anxious. "You are absolutely sure about the paperwork, Veronica?" I leaned forward, grabbing a pen and a notepad. This was it. "Yes, I am sure," Veronica replied. Her voice was sharp, annoyed by his doubt. "The board has already been prepped. They see him as a liability. When he signs the transfer of power, it is immediate. You get full control of the liquid assets for investment purposes. That is $50 million, Kenji. Enough to pay off your debts." She paused. "And enough to get us to the Caymans before anyone realizes the accounts are empty." I wrote it down. Friday, board meeting, transfer of power. "And what about him?" Kenji asked. "We can't leave him behind to talk. If he wakes up and realizes the money is gone, he will call the feds." "He won't wake up," Veronica said. Her voice was so cold it made the temperature in my study drop. I stopped writing. I held my breath. "What do you mean?" Kenji asked. "I have it all arranged," she said casually, as if she were discussing a dinner menu. "As soon as the meeting is over, I am taking him home. I told the nurse to take the night off. I have a vial of insulin in my vanity." "Insulin?" Kenji asked. "He is not diabetic." "Exactly," Veronica said. "That is the beauty of it. A massive overdose of insulin causes severe hypoglycemia. The brain starves of glucose. He will go into a coma, and then his heart will stop. By the time the coroner looks at him, the insulin will have metabolized. It leaves no trace in the blood after a few hours. Given his history of stroke and heart disease, it will be ruled a natural cardiac arrest." I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Insulin. It was a coward's weapon. A silent, invisible killer. She had thought of everything. She wasn't just a greedy wife, she was a calculated psychopath. "When?" Kenji asked. "Friday night," she answered. "We sign the papers at 2. He dies by 10. We are on the plane Saturday morning." I took the headphones off. My hands were shaking again, but not from weakness. They were shaking from the sheer adrenaline coursing through my veins. Friday. Today was Wednesday. I had 48 hours. 48 hours before they turned my company into a piggy bank and my body into a corpse. I looked at the calendar on my desk. Friday the 13th. How fitting. I stood up and walked to the small safe behind the portrait of my father. I spun the dial and opened it. Inside sat a secure satellite phone, a relic from my days doing construction in hostile territories. I pulled it out and extended the antenna. I dialed Solomon's number. It rang once. Yeah, Solomon's voice was gravelly, sleep-filled. "Wake up, Marine," I said, my voice steady and hard. "Harold, what time is it?" "Time is a luxury we don't have," I said. "I just heard the endgame. They're going to hit me with insulin on Friday night after I sign the papers. They're going to make it look like a heart attack." There was a pause on the other end. I could hear the rustle of sheets as Solomon sat up, instantly awake. "Insulin," he repeated. "That is dirty. That is professional." "We are going to be more professional," I said. "What do you need?" Solomon asked. I looked around my study. I looked at the books, the models, the life I had built. I was ready to burn it all down if it meant taking them with me. "Initiate Operation Okinawa," I said. Solomon let out a low whistle. "Are you sure, Harold? Once we start that, there is no going back. You are going to expose everything. The company, the accounts, your own history." "I don't care about the company," I said. "I care about the kill. I want the board there. I want the press there. And I want the Yakuza to know exactly where their money is." I paused, looking at the receiver where the faint sound of Kenji's laughter was still buzzing. "Get the paperwork ready, Saul. And call your contact at the FBI. Tell them we are going to serve them a conspiracy charge on a silver platter. But not until I say so. I want to see the look in her eyes when the trap snaps shut." "I will be ready," Solomon said. "Stay alive, Harold. Don't eat anything she gives you." "I won't," I said. I hung up the phone and placed it back in the safe. I walked over to the window and looked out at the dark grounds of my estate. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. A storm was coming. "Let it come," I whispered. I turned off the lights in the study and unlocked the door. I had to go back to my bedroom. I had to crawl back into that bed and lie next to the empty space where my murderous wife would sleep when she returned from her lover. I had to play the victim for 2 more days. But as I walked through the dark hallway, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a ghost. And ghosts are terrifying because they have nothing left to lose. Friday was coming, and I was going to bring hell with it. The sun rose on Thursday morning with a deceptive beauty. Light filtered through the silk curtains of the master bedroom, painting the room in soft hues of gold and cream. To anyone looking in, it was a scene of domestic tranquility. But inside my chest, a storm was raging. I had spent the night awake, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing every twitch, every groan, every blank stare. Today was the day I had to sell the performance of a lifetime. If I failed, if I showed even a flicker of the strength returning to my limbs, Veronica would panic. She would cancel the meeting, or worse,
She would accelerate the timeline and overdose me before I could trap them. I needed them confident. I needed them to believe I was already 1 foot in the grave. Breakfast was served on the terrace. Veronica was already there, sipping her espresso, scrolling through her phone. She didn't look up when the nurse wheeled me out. She was too busy texting Kenji, no doubt coordinating the final details of my demise. The nurse parked me in the shade and placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of me. It was gray and tasteless, fitting for a man she thought was fading away. I waited until the nurse stepped back inside to fetch my medication. I looked at Veronica. She was wearing a red dress, the color of blood. It was too bright for a morning at home. It was a victory dress. I decided to give her a show. I reached for my coffee cup with my left hand, the one that was supposed to be weak. I let my fingers tremble violently. The cup rattled against the saucer. Clink, clink, clink. Veronica sighed, a sound of pure irritation. "Harold, please," she said without looking up. "Do not make a mess." I didn't stop. I amplified the tremor. I let my arm jerk, knocking the cup over. Hot coffee splashed across the pristine white tablecloth and onto my lap. But I didn't stop there. I let my head snap back. I rolled my eyes up into my skull until only the whites were showing. I locked my jaw and let a guttural, choking sound escape my throat. I let my body go rigid, then began to convulse, shaking the wheelchair violently. Veronica dropped her phone. For a second, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear for me, fear for the plan. "Harold!" she screamed. She jumped up, knocking her chair over. She didn't run to hold me. She didn't check my tongue. She ran to the door and screamed for help.
He is having a seizure. Do not let him die. Not yet.
The nurse rushed out, her face pale. Together they wrestled me out of the chair and onto the flat surface of the terrace floor. I kept seizing, counting the seconds in my head. 1 Mississippi. 2 Mississippi. I had seen men seize from heat stroke in the jungle. I knew exactly what it looked like. I let foam gather at the corners of my mouth. "Call Dr. Thorne!" Veronica yelled at the nurse. "Do not call 911. Call Thorne, now!" I stopped shaking. I let my body go completely limp. I lay there on the cold stone, staring unseeingly at the blue sky, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. Veronica was hovering over me, her hand checking my pulse. Her grip was tight, painful. "You better not die on me, you old fool," she whispered. "We are so close. Just hold on 1 more day." 20 minutes later, Dr. Thorne arrived. Thorne was a slick man with sweaty palms and a medical license that should have been revoked years ago. He was on Veronica's payroll. I had suspected it for months, but today confirmed it. He didn't rush in with a defibrillator. He walked in with a leather bag and a look of annoyance. They had moved me to the bed. I lay there, eyes half open, drool drying on my chin. I was the picture of a man at the end of his road. Thorne shined a penlight into my eyes. I didn't blink. I had practiced this. You focus on a point 1,000 miles away and you don't let the light touch you. "How is he?" Veronica asked, pacing the room. Thorne straightened up, putting his stethoscope away. He didn't check my blood pressure. He didn't check my reflexes. He just looked at Veronica and shook his head theatrically. "It is the cerebral cortex," he said, spewing medical nonsense to justify his fee. "The neural pathways are collapsing faster than we anticipated. The stroke caused a cascade failure." "What does that mean?" Veronica demanded. "It means the window is closing, Veronica," Thorne said, his voice grave. He is slipping into a vegetative state. Right now, he has moments of lucidity, but by the weekend, he will be gone. The lights will be on, but nobody will be home. Veronica bit her lip. This was the pressure point I wanted them to feel. "Can he sign the papers?" she asked. Thorne looked at me. I lay perfectly still. "If you do it tomorrow, yes," Thorne said. "If you wait until Monday, a judge will look at him and declare him incapacitated. If that happens, the state steps in. They will freeze his assets, appoint an independent guardian, and launch an investigation into his care. You won't get a dime until probate settles, which could take years." "Years?" Veronica repeated, horror dawning on her face. "We don't have years. Kenji needs the liquidity now." "Then get the signature tomorrow," Thorne advised. "I will give him a cocktail now. It is a potent neurostabilizer. It will stop the seizures and keep him docile, but it is a temporary fix. It will also make him highly suggestible. He will do whatever you tell him to do, just like a robot." "Do it," Veronica said instantly. Thorne opened his bag. I watched through my eyelashes as he pulled out a syringe and a small vial of clear liquid. This was the dangerous part. I didn't know what was in that vial. If it was a heavy sedative, I might lose my edge. I might actually fall asleep and miss the meeting. I had to fight it. Metabolism, adrenaline. I had to burn through whatever he gave me. Thorne rolled up my sleeve. I felt the cold sting of the alcohol wipe, then the sharp prick of the needle. He pushed the plunger down. "There," he said. "That will keep him quiet. He won't be doing any more shaking. He will just drift until you need him." The drug hit my system fast. My arms felt heavy, like they were filled with sand. My eyelids drooped. It was a muscle relaxant, strong stuff. But my mind was still clear. I focused on my breathing. In, out. Keep the blood moving. Don't let it settle. Thorne left a few minutes later, promising to return on Saturday to sign the death certificate. He didn't say the words, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. I lay alone in the room for an hour, fighting the drug. I flexed my toes. I clenched my abdominal muscles. I forced my brain to do math problems. 12 times 12 is 144. 17 times 6 is 102. Stay sharp, Harold. Stay sharp. Then the door opened again. It wasn't Veronica. The footsteps were heavier. Kenji walked in. He was wearing a silk robe. My silk robe. The one I bought in Kyoto. He walked over to the bed and looked down at me. He had a glass of my best whiskey in his hand. He took a sip, savoring it, staring at my helpless form. "He is out cold," Veronica called from the hallway. "Thorne said he can't hear anything." Kenji smirked. He sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight. He leaned in close, so close I could smell the alcohol on his breath. "You gave us a scare this morning, old man," he whispered in English. He reached out and tapped my forehead with his finger. Tap, tap, tap. "But don't worry, your suffering is almost over. Tomorrow, you give me your empire, and tomorrow night, you go to sleep forever." He chuckled, a low, nasty sound. "You know, I almost feel bad," he continued, switching to Japanese. "Omae ga kizuki ageta mono, subete ore no mono ni naru. Omae no kaisha, omae no kane, omae no tsuma. Everything you built will be mine,
Your company, your money, your wife. He stood up, finishing the whiskey in one gulp. He leaned down one last time, his lips brushing my ear. Sayonara, Harold-san. He turned and walked out of the room, laughing as he went to join my wife. I lay there in the silence. The drug was pulling me down, trying to drag me into darkness. But I held on to that one word. Sayonara. Goodbye. No, Kenji, not goodbye. I concentrated on the rage. I used it as fuel to burn away the fog of the medicine. I stared at the ceiling until my vision cleared. You think this is the end? You think you are saying goodbye to a dying man? I slowly moved my right hand under the covers. It was heavy, sluggish, but it moved. I clenched it into a fist. Tomorrow isn't a funeral, I thought. Tomorrow is a courtroom. And I am the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Sleep well, children, because when I wake up, the nightmare begins. And it won't be mine. The drug Thorne had given me was heavy, but my mind was sharper than ever. I lay in the dim light of the bedroom, my body a prison of artificial lethargy, but my fingers were busy. Under the cover of the silk sheets, I retrieved the burner phone I had hidden in the pillowcase. It was time to pull the strings. It was time to turn their greed into the noose that would hang them. I typed a message to Solomon. Deploy the bait. Target, Kenji Sato. Amount, 50 million. I hit send and waited. Across the city, Solomon was ready. We had scripted this move perfectly. He wasn't going to call as my lawyer. He was going to call as Marcus Sterling, a representative of a shadow hedge fund in Zurich that specialized in high-risk, high-reward takeovers. It was exactly the kind of dirty money Kenji would be desperate for. I lay there, counting the minutes. The house was quiet, but I knew Kenji was downstairs in my library, probably drinking my scotch and imagining himself the king of my castle. Then I heard it. A shout from downstairs, not of anger, but of excitement. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. The door to the bedroom flew open. It was Kenji. He wasn't wearing the smirk of a gigolo anymore. He was wearing the frantic, wide-eyed look of a gambler who just saw the jackpot. He was holding his phone, his knuckles white. "Veronica," he shouted, not caring that I was lying right there. "Veronica, where are you?" Veronica came running from her dressing room, a silk robe wrapped around her. "What is it? Keep your voice down. You will wake him up." "Who cares if he wakes up?" Kenji yelled, pacing the room like a caged tiger. "I just got a call, a secure line from Zurich. Marcus Sterling." Veronica frowned. "Who is Marcus Sterling?" "He represents the Obsidian Fund," Kenji said, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "They specialize in hostile takeovers and dark pools. He said he heard rumors about the leadership change at Foster Holdings. He said they want to inject $50 million into the company." $50 million? Veronica's eyes went wide. "Why?" "Because they think the old man is holding the company back." Kenji laughed, a manic sound. "Sterling said they want fresh blood, they want aggressive expansion, and they want to do it through me. He thinks I am the architect of this whole transition." I lay perfectly still, listening. It was working. Solomon had played his part perfectly. He had fed Kenji's ego exactly what it was starving for. "But there is a catch," Kenji said, stopping his pacing. "What catch?" Veronica asked sharply. "Sterling said the offer expires at close of business tomorrow. He needs proof that I have full executive control. He needs to see the signed power of attorney and the board resolution by 5 p.m. Friday. If we have the papers,
he wires the 50 million immediately. If not, the deal is off. Veronica looked at me, then back at Kenji. I could see the wheels turning in her head. $50 million. That wasn't just enough to pay Kenji's debts. That was enough to disappear forever. It was enough to buy an island. "We have to do it," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We have to get him to sign at the meeting. No mistakes." "But wait," Kenji said, his greed suddenly turning into suspicion. 50 million is a lot. How do we split it?" "Split it?" Veronica scoffed. "What do you mean?" "It goes into the company account. Then we transfer it to the Caymans like we planned." "No," Kenji said, stepping closer to her. "Sterling called me. He wants to invest in me. That 50 million is my leverage. I need 30 of it to clear my obligations." 30? Veronica's face twisted in anger. "Are you insane? The plan was 50-50 on everything. You owe people money, Kenji, I know that. But don't think you are going to use my husband's company to pay your gambling debts and leave me with scraps." I watched them through half-closed eyelids. The cracks were forming. Greed is a powerful motivator, but it is a terrible glue. "I am the one taking the risk here, Veronica," Kenji shouted, forgetting to whisper. "I am the one forging the documents. I am the one dealing with the Japanese contacts. If this goes south, the Yakuza come for me, not you. I need that money." "Don't you raise your voice at me in my house," Veronica hissed. "I am the one killing him. I am the one injecting the insulin. I am the one who has to play the grieving widow while you run off to spend the money." Silence. A heavy, terrified silence fell over the room. They had said it out loud. They had screamed their conspiracy for the very walls to hear. And I heard it. Every word. Kenji took a deep breath, trying to calm down. He ran a hand through his hair. Okay, look. We are fighting over money we don't have yet. Let's just get the signature. Once the money is wired, we can discuss the split. But we have to make sure he signs. If he messes this up, if he hesitates in front of the board—" "He won't," Veronica said, glaring at my prone form. "Thorne's drug has turned his brain to mush. Look at him. He hasn't moved an inch." She walked over to the bed. I felt her cold hand on my cheek. She slapped me, lightly at first, then harder. "Harold? Can you hear me?" I didn't flinch. I let my head roll to the side, my mouth hanging open. "See," she said with disgust, "he is gone. Tomorrow, we just prop him up, put a pen in his hand, and guide it. He is just a puppet now." Kenji looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and contempt. $50 million, he muttered, just for a signature. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "You are worth more dead than alive, old man. Thank you for the donation." They left the room, arguing in hushed tones about flight schedules and bank transfers. I listened to their footsteps fade down the hallway. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but my vision was clear. They were turning on each other. The money had blinded them. They were so focused on the imaginary 50 million that they didn't see the trap closing around their legs. They didn't realize that Marcus Sterling didn't exist. They didn't realize that the Obsidian Fund was just Solomon sitting in his office with a voice modulator. And they certainly didn't realize that the puppet on the bed was about to cut his own strings. I smiled in the darkness. A cold, hard smile. Argue all you want, I thought. Fight over the spoils. Because tomorrow, You won't be fighting for money. You will be fighting for your freedom. And you are going to lose. I closed my eyes again, letting the darkness take me. I needed to rest. Tomorrow was the big show, and I had a performance to deliver that would bring the house down. $50 million. The price of a soul. And tomorrow, I was going to collect. The house was alive with the sound of betrayal. Soft jazz music floated through the air, masking the sinister reality of what was actually happening in my living room. Veronica had called it a small gathering of close friends to celebrate my stability, a phrase that made me want to laugh out loud. Stability. That was her code word for my successful transition into a vegetable. To the outside world, this was a loving wife trying to maintain normalcy for her ailing husband. To me, it was a wake. My own wake. And I was the only one who knew the corpse was still breathing. They had dressed me in a velvet smoking jacket that smelled of mothballs and positioned my wheelchair in the corner near the grand piano. I was a prop, a piece of furniture, a conversation starter for the vultures she had invited into our home. I sat there, my head lolling slightly to the right, my eyes half-lidded, watching the theater of cruelty unfold. The guests were a hand-picked selection of the people I had trusted most in my professional life. People I had mentored, people I had promoted, people whose mortgages I had paid off when they hit rough patches. Now they stood around drinking my vintage Dom Perignon, eating canapés paid for by my accounts, and talking about my company as if I were already dead. I saw Philip, my chief financial officer, standing by the fireplace. He was wearing a new Rolex, a gold Daytona that cost more than his annual bonus. He was laughing with Kenji. Philip, the man I had hired straight out of college because I saw potential in his hungry eyes. I had treated him like a son. I had taught him everything I knew about the markets. I watched Philip clap Kenji on the shoulder. "Don't worry about the audit," Philip said, his voice carrying over the music. "I have moved the assets into the holding company just like you asked. Once the old man signs tomorrow, we can liquidate the pension fund and reinvest it in your tech venture. No one will notice for at least 2 quarters. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. The pension fund. That money belonged to the workers, to the men and women who poured concrete and welded steel in the freezing Chicago winters. Philip wasn't just stealing from me, he was stealing from families. He was stealing their retirements to fund Kenji's gambling debts. I added Philip to the list. The blacklist. In my mind, I drew a thick red line through his face. You think you are smart, Philip, but you left a paper trail, and Solomon has it all. Enjoy your watch. It will be the only thing you have left to sell for bail money. Next to him was Linda, my vice president of operations. She was a shark in a Chanel suit. She had always been ambitious, but I thought she had integrity. I was wrong. She was huddled with Veronica, looking at architectural blueprints spread out on the coffee table. We can rebrand the tower by next month, Linda was saying, pointing a manicured finger at the plans for my flagship building. Remove the Foster name. Call it something modern. The Obsidian Tower. It sounds sleek. It sounds powerful. The Foster brand is too associated with, well, with the past. Veronica nodded, sipping her champagne. I agree, Linda. We need a fresh start. Harold was great in his time, but he was too sentimental. He held on to properties just for the history. We need to be ruthless. Sentimental. That is what they called loyalty. That is what they called honor. I watched Linda smile that sharp, predatory smile. I added her to the list.
You want to erase my name, Linda? I will make sure your name is mud in this town. You will never work in this industry again. The room was filled with them. Lawyers who had drafted my will, consultants who had eaten at my table. They were all there, drinking the wine of the man they were betraying. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy. Then came the moment that made my blood boil. Veronica clinked a silver spoon against her crystal flute. The room went quiet. The jazz music faded. All eyes turned to the grieving, devoted wife standing in the center of the room, looking radiant in a dress that showed just enough skin to distract the men and just enough modesty to fool the women. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "As you know, it has been a difficult few months. Seeing Harold like this, it breaks my heart every day." She paused to wipe away a non-existent tear. A murmur of sympathy went through the room. "But," she continued, brightening up, "we have hope. Tomorrow is a big day for the company and for our family. We are taking steps to ensure that Harold's legacy is preserved and that the future is secure. And I know that is what he would have wanted. He would have wanted us to move forward, to be strong, to not let the past hold us back." She turned to me. She walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt like a branding iron. "To Harold," she said, raising her glass, "to the man who started it all, may he find the peace he deserves." To Harold, the room echoed. Peace. She meant death. She was toasting to my grave. Kenji raised his glass higher than anyone else. He caught my eye. He winked. A subtle, quick wink that only I saw. It was a victory lap. I sat there, frozen, letting a line of drool escape the corner of my mouth just to sell the act. I let them drink. I let them celebrate. Because the higher they climbed tonight, the harder the fall would be tomorrow. I looked at their faces, memorizing every smile, every nod of agreement. I was the ghost at the feast, and I was taking names. The party dragged on. The guests began to mingle again, the noise level rising. I was forgotten in my corner, just a sad old man in a wheelchair. That was when I felt a presence beside me. It wasn't the perfume of Veronica or the cologne of the traders. It was the smell of lavender soap and baking flour. I didn't move my head, but I shifted my eyes. It was Elena. She was the head housekeeper. She had been with me for 30 years. She had been there when my first wife died. She had been there when I brought Veronica home, and I remembered the look of disapproval on her face back then. I should have listened to her. Elena was invisible to people like Veronica and Kenji. To them, she was just a uniform, a pair of hands to serve drinks and clean up messes. She was holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She moved closer to me, pretending to adjust the blanket on my lap. "Mr. Harold," she whispered. Her voice was barely a breath. I kept staring straight ahead, but I tensed my hand under the blanket. She leaned in, fussing with the fabric, shielding me from the view of the room with her body. "I saw them in the kitchen," she murmured, her hands moving quickly. "The man, Kenji, he had your medicine bottles. He emptied the heart pills and put in something else. White powder. He used a funnel." My heart skipped a beat. So that was the plan. They weren't just relying on the insulin. They were spiking my regular medication tonight to weaken me before the main event. Elena looked around nervously. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. She pressed it into my hand under the blanket. "Do not take anything tonight," she whispered urgently. I switched the water on your nightstand with tap water from the servants' quarters. It is safe, but do not take the pills. Please, Mr. Harold, you have to wake up. We need you. She squeezed my hand. It was a firm, rough grip. The grip of a woman who had worked hard all her life. In a room full of millionaires and executives, this housekeeper was the only person with a soul. I couldn't speak. I couldn't thank her. If I broke character now, I would endanger her too. So I did the only thing I could. I squeezed her hand back. Just once. A sharp, deliberate pressure. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked at me, and for a second, the mask dropped. She saw me. She saw Harold Foster. She nodded imperceptibly. Then she straightened up, her face returning to the blank expression of a servant. "Would you like a napkin, sir?" she asked, loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. I made a groaning sound. She wiped my chin gently and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there, clutching the piece of paper in my sweaty palm. I felt a surge of strength that had nothing to do with medicine. I wasn't alone. I had Solomon on the outside, and I had Elena on the inside. I waited until no one was looking, then slowly unfolded the paper with my thumb. It wasn't a note. It was a pill. One of the real heart pills. She had managed to save one for me. I looked at Philip laughing by the fire. I looked at Veronica flirting with the lawyers. I looked at Kenji counting his imaginary millions. Laugh while you can, I thought. Drink my wine. Plan my funeral. But remember this night. Remember it well. Because it is the last time any of you will ever taste champagne. I closed my eyes and swallowed the real pill dry. It scraped my throat, but it tasted like hope. Tomorrow, the heavy lifting begins. But tonight, I survive. And thanks to a brave woman with flour on her hands, I was going to make it to the morning. The morning light that filtered through the heavy curtains was gray and unforgiving. It was Friday, the 13th, a fitting date for the funeral my wife had planned for me. But as I lay there, listening to the rain tap against the window pane, I didn't feel like a man marching to the gallows. I felt like a coiled spring. The fear was gone. The hesitation was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard determination that settled in the pit of my stomach like a stone. Veronica entered the room at precisely 7 o'clock. She didn't come alone. She brought the smell of fresh coffee and pastries, a scent that filled the room and made my empty stomach rumble in protest. But she didn't bring a tray for me. She brought a garment bag. "Good morning, Harold," she said, her voice brisk and businesslike. "Today is the big day. We need to get you ready." She unzipped the bag. Inside hung a suit. It wasn't one of my Navy power suits, the ones I wore when I was closing deals and crushing competitors. It was black. Pitch black. The fabric was heavy, somber. It was the suit I had worn to the funeral of a business partner 3 years ago. It was a suit for mourning. She wants me to look like a corpse before I am even dead, I thought. "Come on, up we go," she said, pulling the covers back. She didn't call the nurse. She wanted to dress me herself. It was part of her ritual, a final act of ownership. She stripped off my pajamas, handling my limbs with a rough efficiency. She buttoned my shirt, pulling the collar tight. Too tight. It felt like a noose. Then came the trousers, and finally, the jacket. She adjusted the shoulders, smoothing out the fabric. "You look very dignified," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Like a statesman." I sat there on the edge of the bed, letting my head droop, my eyes unfocused. My stomach growled loudly, an embarrassing guttural sound in the quiet room. Veronica glanced at the bedside table where a glass of water stood. "No breakfast today, Harold," she said, not even pretending to be sorry. "We don't want you having any accidents like yesterday. Besides, you look better when you were a little gaunt. It adds to the sympathy factor." She turned and walked to the mirror, applying a fresh coat of blood-red lipstick. "The board needs to see that you are frail," she continued, talking to my reflection. "They need to see that letting go of the company is the only humane option. If you look too healthy, they might ask questions. So, we will just keep you hungry for a few more hours." She smiled at herself in the glass. It was a predator's smile. I watched her, feeling the hunger pangs twist inside me. But I welcomed them. The hunger made me sharp. It reminded me that I was fighting for my survival. Every growl of my stomach was a reminder of her cruelty. A few minutes later, the door opened and Kenji walked in. He was glowing. He wore a sharp gray suit, Italian cut, with a pocket square that matched Veronica's lipstick. He looked like he had already won the lottery. "Ready?" he asked, rubbing his hands together. "He is ready," Veronica said, grabbing her purse. "He is weak, he is hungry, and he is medicated. He won't give us any trouble." Kenji walked over to me. He looked at the black suit and let out a low whistle. "Nice touch, Veronica. He looks like he is ready for the coffin." He laughed, a light, carefree sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. "Let's go," Kenji said. "I will drive." "I want to take the rolls. It sends the right message." They hoisted me into the wheelchair and navigated the hallways of the house I had built. We took the elevator down to the garage. Kenji wheeled me to the passenger side of my Phantom. He opened the door and shoved me in, not bothering to be gentle. My head bumped against the door frame. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Sorry, old man." He got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The powerful motor purred to life. He adjusted the mirror, admiring himself one last time. "Next stop, Foster Tower," he announced. As we pulled out of the driveway and onto the wet streets of Chicago, Kenji started to whistle. It was a jaunty, annoying tune. I recognized it. It was the theme song from a game show. He was whistling because he thought he was about to win the grand prize. I stared out the window at the passing city. The rain smeared the glass, turning the buildings into gray ghosts. I saw the steel skeletons of skyscrapers I had helped finance. I saw the parks I had donated. This was my city. And these two parasites thought they could take it from me with a forged signature and a vial of poison. I closed my eyes and let my head rest against the cool leather. To them, I was sleeping. But inside my mind, I was in a dojo. I was rehearsing. I wasn't rehearsing a speech in English. I was rehearsing the language of my youth, the language of the streets of Okinawa. I went over the words, tasting them on my tongue. "Kisama, you bastard. Uragiri mono, traitor. Jigoku ni ochiro, go to hell." I needed the inflection to be perfect. I needed the tone to be absolute. When I spoke today, I didn't want to sound like an American tourist trying to speak Japanese. I wanted to sound like a Yakuza boss, delivering a death sentence. I visualized Kenji's face. I visualized the moment the blood would drain from his cheeks. I visualized the terror in his eyes when he realized the vegetable knew his darkest secrets. "Hey, wake up back there," Kenji called out, interrupting my meditation. "We are almost there." I opened my eyes a crack. We were turning onto Michigan Avenue. The Foster Tower rose into the sky, a monolith of glass and steel. It was the crown jewel of my empire. But as we approached the main entrance, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There were people, a lot of people. Barriers had been set up on the sidewalk. A crowd of reporters and photographers were jostling for position. Television vans were parked along the curb, their satellite dishes pointed at the sky. "What is this?" Kenji asked, slowing the car down. "I called them," Veronica said from the back seat. She was checking her makeup again. "You called the press?" Kenji asked, sounding nervous. "Why?" "Because," Veronica said, snapping her compact shut. "We need witnesses, Kenji. We need the world to see Harold Foster handing over the keys to the kingdom voluntarily. If it is on the 6 o'clock news, no one can challenge the validity of the transfer later. It cements the narrative. The loving wife, the brilliant successor, and the retiring legend. It is perfect PR." Kenji relaxed. "You are a genius, V." I looked at the crowd. There must have been 50 reporters out there. Flashes were already going off as they recognized the car. Perfect PR, I thought. She had built a stage. She wanted a spectacle. She wanted the whole world to watch her moment of triumph. She didn't realize she had just invited the whole world to watch her execution. Kenji stopped the car right in front of the red carpet. The doorman, a man named Eddie who had known me for 20 years, rushed forward to open the door. He looked concerned when he saw me slumped in the seat. "Mr. Foster?" Eddie asked, leaning in. "Get the wheelchair, Eddie," Veronica barked as she stepped out, instantly putting on her sad, brave face for the cameras. Eddie scrambled to get the chair from the trunk. Kenji got out and walked around, waving to the cameras like a movie star. They pulled me out of the car. The cold air hit my face, waking me up fully. The noise was deafening. Shouts of, "Mr. Foster, over here!" and "Mrs. Foster, how is he doing?" filled the air. Veronica stood beside me, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. She looked at the cameras with teary eyes. "He is doing the best he can," she told a reporter from Channel 5. "Today is a hard day, but a necessary one. We just want to do what is best for the company." She leaned down and whispered in my ear, her voice a hiss that the microphones couldn't pick up. "Smile, Harold. Don't look like a zombie. Just a sad, tired smile." I didn't smile. I let my head hang low. I let them take their pictures of the frail old man in the black suit. I wanted them to have the before picture. It would make the after picture so much more shocking. Kenji took the handles of the wheelchair. "Ready to make history, old man?" he muttered. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and exhaust and impending justice. My heart slowed down. My hands stopped shaking. The stage was set. The audience was waiting. The villains were in place. I lifted my head just a fraction of an inch, enough to see the revolving doors of my building. Showtime, I thought. And then I let them wheel me into the lion's den. The elevator ride to the top floor of the Foster Tower was a silent ascent into the belly of the beast. The hum of the machinery was the only sound in the confined space, a stark contrast to the flashbulbs and shouting reporters we had just left on the sidewalk. Veronica stood behind my wheelchair, her breathing steady and calm. Kenji stood in front of the doors, checking his reflection in the polished brass panel, adjusting his tie knot by a fraction of an inch. He looked ready for a coronation. I sat slumped in the chair, my chin resting on my chest,
watching the floor numbers climb. 40, 50, 60. Every ding of the bell brought me closer to the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would define the rest of my life. The doors slid open with a soft chime. We stepped out into the lobby of the executive suite. The air up here was different. It was cool, sterile, and smelled of lemon polish and old money. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, who usually greeted me with a warm smile, looked up and froze. Her eyes darted from my limp form to Veronica's stony face. She didn't say a word. She just pressed a button on her phone, presumably alerting the board that the spectacle had arrived. Veronica pushed me down the long corridor lined with portraits of the company's founders. My father's painting hung at the end of the hall. I felt a pang of guilt as we passed it. He had built this company on handshakes and integrity. Today, his son was being wheeled in to sign it away to a grifter and a black widow. But I promised his painted eyes that by the time the sun set, the honor of our name would be restored. We reached the double doors of the boardroom. Kenji reached out and pushed them open with a flourish. The room was full. 12 members of the board sat around the massive mahogany table, a table I had commissioned from a single slab of redwood 30 years ago. They all stood up as we entered. The scraping of chairs against the carpet was a ragged, discordant sound. I saw the faces of men and women I had worked with for decades. Some looked concerned, their brows furrowed with genuine pity. Others, the ones who had been whispering in corners with Kenji, looked impatient. They looked like sharks sensing blood in the water. Veronica wheeled me to the head of the table, my spot. The place where I had commanded billion-dollar mergers and navigated economic crises. Now, I was parked there like a piece of broken furniture. She locked the brakes on the wheelchair. The click was loud in the silent room. "Please, sit," Veronica said, her voice projecting the perfect blend of authority and sorrow. The board members sat down. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Everyone was looking at me, but no one wanted to make eye contact. They were looking at my hands, my slumped shoulders, the way my head listed to the side. They were seeing exactly what Veronica wanted them to see. A relic. Veronica remained standing. She placed a hand on my shoulder, a possessive, heavy weight. "Thank you all for being here today," she began. "I know this is difficult. It is difficult for me, and I know it is difficult for all of you who have known and loved Harold for so long." She paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with every member. "We all know that Harold Foster is a fighter," she continued. "He built this empire with his bare hands. But we also know that time is an enemy that no man can defeat. The stroke took a toll on him that we can no longer ignore. The doctors have been clear. His cognitive decline is accelerating. It is not safe for him to bear the burden of leadership anymore. It is not fair to him." I listened to her eulogize me while I was still breathing. She was good. I had to give her that. She sounded like she was doing this out of love, out of a desire to protect my legacy. "Harold deserves to rest," she said, her voice softening. "He deserves to spend his remaining time in peace, without the stress of market fluctuations and shareholder meetings. That is why we are here, to grant him that peace, and to ensure that the company he loves is left in capable hands." She gestured toward Kenji, who was standing near the window, looking out at the city skyline with a contemplative expression. "You all know Kenji Sato," she said. "He has been working closely with us for the past 6 months. His vision for the tech integration of our logistics division is revolutionary. He represents the future. Harold trusts him. I trust him. And today, we are asking you to trust him too. Kenji turned around. He walked toward the table with a slow, confident stride. He didn't bow this time. He didn't play the humble partner. He walked like he already owned the building. "Thank you, Veronica," Kenji said. His English was crisp, professional. "It is an honor to be considered for this responsibility. I have learned so much from Harold. I consider him a father figure, and it breaks my heart to see him like this. But we must be pragmatic. The market waits for no one. We need to secure the liquidity deal with the Obsidian Fund by 5 o'clock today, or we lose a $50 million opportunity. Harold understands this. That is why he agreed to this meeting." He looked down at me. "Isn't that right, Harold?" I let out a low, unintelligible moan. I twitched my left hand. To the board, it looked like a spasm. To Kenji, it was submission. "Let's get this done," said a voice from the other end of the table. It was Philip, the CFO, the trader with the new Rolex. "We are on a tight schedule." The corporate attorney, a man named Silverman who had been paid a hefty retainer by Veronica last week, stood up. He was holding a thick leather binder. He walked over to me and placed the binder on the table. He opened it to the page marked with a yellow sticky note. The text was dense, but the bold header was clear. "Irrevocable transfer of executive power and assets." "Mr. Foster," Silverman said, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is the document we discussed. It transfers all voting rights and executive control to Mr. Sato and Mrs. Foster, effective immediately. It also grants them power of attorney over your personal estate." He pulled a gold fountain pen from his pocket. It was my pen. The Mont Blanc Meisterstück I had used to sign the deal that built the stadium. Veronica must have given it to him. Another theft, another insult. He uncapped the pen and placed it in my right hand. "Just sign right here, Mr. Foster," Silverman said, pointing to the line. I gripped the pen. My hand felt cold. I let the tremors start. I shook my hand violently, rattling the pen against the paper. Ink splattered in tiny black dots on the white page. Veronica leaned in close, her perfume suffocating me. "It is okay, honey," she whispered. "Just make your mark. I will help you." She reached out to guide my hand, but Kenji stopped her. "No," Kenji said sharply. "He has to do it himself. The witnesses need to see him sign it on his own." Kenji walked around the table and stood right next to me. He leaned down, his face close to mine. His eyes were hard, cruel. "Sign it, old man," he hissed, too low for the others to hear. "Sign it, or I swear I will burn this whole place down with you inside." I felt the eyes of everyone in the room on me. The silence was deafening. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. I could hear the beat of my own heart. It was slow, steady, powerful. I looked at the paper. I looked at the line that would end my life. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath. I pressed the tip of the pen to the paper. The ink flowed, forming the first loop of the letter H. And then I stopped. I didn't lift the pen. I just froze. My hand became as still as stone. The scratching sound ceased. The room held its breath. "Harold?" Veronica whispered, her voice laced with sudden panic. "Harold, what is wrong?" "Keep writing." I didn't move. I stared at the paper, but I wasn't looking at the contract anymore. I was looking at the reflection of Kenji's face in the polished wood of the table. He was frowning.
He was confused. "Why did he stop?" Philip asked from the end of the table. "Is he having another seizure?" No, I wasn't having a seizure. I was taking a pause. The pause before the thunder. I tightened my grip on the pen. I tightened it so hard that my knuckles turned white. And for the first time in months, I sat up. I didn't push myself up with my arms. I used my core. I lifted my chin off my chest. I rolled my shoulders back. The slump vanished. The frailty evaporated. I turned my head slowly to the left. I looked up. I looked straight into Kenji's eyes. And I smiled. It wasn't the smile of a senile old man. It was the smile of a shark that had just tasted blood. Kenji stepped back, his eyes widening in shock. What are you doing?" he stammered. I didn't answer him. Not yet. I simply placed the pen down on the table with a deliberate, heavy click. I pushed the binder away from me. Then I cleared my throat. The sound echoed in the silent room like a gavel strike. "I don't think I will be signing this today," I said. My voice was clear. It was deep. It was the voice that had commanded construction sites and boardrooms for 40 years. Gasps erupted around the table. Veronica covered her mouth with her hand. Silverman dropped his briefcase, but I wasn't done. I kept my eyes locked on Kenji, watching the color drain from his face as the realization hit him like a freight train. I leaned forward and spoke again. But this time, I didn't speak English. "Omae wa mo owari da, Kenji." You are finished, Kenji. The boardroom exploded into chaos, but I didn't hear it. All I saw was the fear in his eyes, and it was beautiful. I slowly lifted my head from the chest where I had kept it bowed for so long. The trembling in my hands, a tremor I had practiced for months until it felt like a second skin, ceased instantly. My spine straightened, shedding the weight of the frailty I had worn like a costume. I locked eyes with Kenji. I saw the confusion flicker in his gaze, followed by a dawning, terrible realization as he watched the fog clear from my eyes, replaced by a clarity as sharp and cold as a samurai sword. I did not speak in the broken, mumbled English they had grown accustomed to ignoring. Instead, I let the silence hang for a heartbeat, heavy and suffocating, before I opened my mouth. The words that came out were not the ramblings of a senile old man. They were sharp, guttural, and spoken in the heavy, rhythmic dialect of Okinawa, the language of my ancestors, the language I had not spoken in this house for 30 years. "You intend to use my hard-earned money to pay off your gambling debts to the Inagawa syndicate? Or were you planning to use it to flee to Brazil with this woman you call a wife?" The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Kenji's face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. It was as if I had physically struck him. He fell back against the leather of his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from the water, no sound escaping his throat. He knew that dialect. He knew what those specific words meant. He knew that the Inagawa-kai did not forgive debts. And he knew that I knew. Veronica, however, was lost. She looked frantically between me and Kenji, her perfect composure cracking under the pressure of a language she did not understand and a tone she had never heard from me. Her voice was shrill, laced with panic as she stammered. "What are you saying? What is going on? Have you gone completely crazy?" I turned my gaze to her. It was a look devoid of the warmth I had once held for the woman I thought would take care of my son. I switched to English, my voice steady, deep, and echoing with authority. "I am not crazy, Veronica. I am not senile, and I most certainly am not stupid. I have simply been pretending to be deaf. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. I reached into the inner pocket of my jacket, the one they thought contained only tissues and hard candies. I pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope. It landed on the mahogany table with a dull, heavy thud that sounded like a judge's gavel sealing a death sentence. "This is what you have been waiting for, isn't it?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. I reached out and flipped the folder open. Glossy photographs spilled out across the polished wood surface, sliding toward them like accusations. The first photo showed Kenji, sweating and disheveled, leaving a known underground gambling den in the warehouse district, flanked by two men with visible tattoos peeking out from their collars. The fear in his eyes in that photo matched the fear in his eyes right now. The next photo was of Veronica. She was not at the charity gala she claimed to be attending last month. She was at a hotel bar, her hand resting intimately on the arm of a travel agent, a man known for facilitating disappearances and new identities in South America. There were brochures for properties in Sao Paulo visible on the table. And then the final photo, the one that made Veronica gasp and cover her mouth with her hand. It was a high-resolution image of a small, nondescript glass vial being handed to her by a man in a parked car. A vial of digitalis, a heart medication that, in high doses, mimics a natural heart attack. The same medication found in the bedside drawer of my late brother before he died suddenly last year. "You thought I was a prop in your life," I said, standing up slowly. "I moved with the power and grace of the man who built this empire, not the shell you thought you were manipulating. You thought you could perform your little play in front of me, discussing my death and my money as if I were already a ghost." Kenji tried to speak, his voice a broken whisper. "Dad, please, it's not what it looks like. I can explain." "You can explain nothing," I roared, slamming my hand down on the table. "Do not insult me further with your lies. I have heard every word, every whisper in the kitchen, every phone call you thought you were making in private, every joke you made about the old fool who drools on himself. I heard you plotting to liquidate my assets. I heard you discussing how much time I had left." I pointed a shaking finger at the photo of the vial. "You were not just going to wait for nature to take its course, were you? You were going to help it along. You were going to poison your own father because you lacked the patience to wait for your inheritance." Veronica began to sob, but they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of a cornered animal realizing there is no escape. She looked at the photos, then at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Who gave you this?" she whispered. "Who is watching us?" "Solomon," I replied coldly. "You remember Solomon, don't you, Kenji? You fired him 5 years ago because you said he was too old, too traditional, too loyal to me. You thought he disappeared. You were wrong. Solomon has been my eyes and ears for 6 months. He has been tracking every dollar you stole, every lie you told, and every step you took toward my destruction." I picked up the dossier and tossed another document onto the pile. It was a bank statement. "I know about the shell company in the Cayman Islands. I know about the $5 million you siphoned from the pension fund. I know that the Inagawa Kai has given you until the end of the month to pay, or they will come for you." Kenji was weeping now, openly and pathetically. He slid out of his chair and fell to his knees, grasping at the hem of my jacket. "Dad, help me, please. They will kill me. You have to help me. I'm your son." I looked down at him. I saw the boy I had raised, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had forgiven time and time again. But I also saw the man who had called me a useless burden, the man who had planned to kill me. You ceased to be my son the moment you decided my life was the price for your mistakes, I said, stepping back from his grasp. You made your bed with thieves and murderers, Kenji. Now you must lie in it. I looked at Veronica. Her mascara was running down her face, ruining the mask of perfection she worked so hard to maintain. And you, I said, my voice dripping with disdain, you wanted a life of luxury in Brazil. You wanted to be a widow with a fortune. Instead, you will be a defendant in a conspiracy to commit murder trial. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had one button to press, one call to make that would end their lives as they knew them. Solomon is outside, I said, watching the color drain from their faces completely. And he is not alone. He brought the detectives from the Major Crimes Unit. They have been listening to the audio feed from this room for the last 10 minutes. They heard everything. The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every second, piercing the walls of the mansion I had built, the home they had turned into a nest of vipers. You wanted to surprise me at the company, didn't you? I asked, looking at my son one last time as the blue and red lights began to flash against the window. You wanted to see if the old man was still sharp. Well, Kenji, are you surprised now? The front door burst open downstairs. Heavy boots thundered on the stairs. I turned my back on them and walked to the window, looking out at the night, feeling a profound, crushing sadness, but no regret. The act was over. The curtain had fallen. And the truth, as terrible as it was finally out in the open. The silence that followed my revelation was fragile, like a sheet of glass waiting to shatter. And shatter it did. Kenji let out a sound that was not human. It was a guttural roar of pure, desperate rage. He did not look at the police officers swarming the hallway downstairs. He looked only at me. In his twisted mind, I was still the obstacle, the old man standing between him and his freedom. He lunged across the mahogany table, his fingers curled into claws, aiming for my throat. But he never reached me. He never even got close. Someone who had stood like a statue in the corner for the entire conversation moved with a speed that defied his age. He stepped forward, a solid wall of loyalty and strength, and intercepted Kenji mid-air. With a practiced motion, he twisted Kenji's arm behind his back and slammed him face first onto the beautiful Persian rug that my late wife had loved so much. The impact shook the floor. That was the signal. The library doors burst open, splintering slightly at the frame from the force. Men in uniforms poured into the room, their voices shouting commands that overlapped into a chaotic symphony of justice. Police, detectives. They filled the space that had once been my sanctuary of peace. Get on the ground, hands behind your head, do it now! The shout jolted Veronica out of her frozen state. She scrambled backward, knocking over a crystal vase, her high heels slipping on the polished wood. Two officers grabbed her by the arms. She began to struggle, kicking and screaming, her face contorted into a mask of ugly indignation. "Let me go! You cannot touch me! This is a mistake! He is lying! That old man is lying!" She looked at me, her eyes wild, pointing a manicured finger in my direction as the officers clicked the handcuffs around her wrists. "You set me up! This is entrapment! I am your wife, Harold! You cannot do this to me! You tricked us!" I stood there, watching the woman I had married, the woman I had brought into my home to share my twilight years. I felt nothing for her. No anger, no pity, just a cold, hard resolve. I walked slowly toward her,
stopping just out of her reach. I reached into my jacket pocket one last time and pulled out a folded document. I held it up so she could see the legal seal stamped on the front. I did not trick you, Veronica. I simply watched you. You say you are my wife, but a wife does not pour 3 times the lethal dose of digitalis into her husband's morning orange juice. Her face went pale, the blood draining from her cheeks as if a plug had been pulled. She stopped struggling. I saw the confusion in your eyes when I did not drink it last Tuesday. You thought I had just forgotten. You did not know that I poured it into the potted fern in my bedroom. That fern is dead, Veronica, and the lab results from the soil samples are already with the district attorney. I tossed the document onto the table next to the photos of her betrayal. This is not a trap. This is a divorce petition. And this is a restraining order. You are no longer my wife. You are simply a stranger who tried to murder me in my sleep. Take her away, I said to the officers. Veronica began to wail, a high-pitched, keen sound that grated on my nerves. It was the sound of a gold digger watching the gold turn to dust. As they dragged her out of the room, her eyes locked with mine. The anger faded, replaced by a terrifying realization of her future. Prison cells, gray walls, no more trips to Brazil, no more money, just the cold reality of her crimes. I turned my attention to the floor. Kenji was being hauled to his feet by 2 burly officers. His nose was bleeding from where it had hit the floor, staining his expensive silk shirt. He was not fighting anymore. He was trembling. His bravado, his arrogance, his cruelty, it had all evaporated, leaving behind a scared little boy. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood. He began to babble, switching frantically between English and Japanese, his mind reverting to the language of his childhood in his panic. Oto-san, Father, please, I am sorry. I didn't mean it. They made me do it. The debts, the Yakuza, they threatened me. Please, tell them to stop. Tell them it was a mistake. I looked at him. I looked at the son I had held in my arms when he was born. I remembered the day I taught him to fish. I remembered his graduation. And then I remembered the recording Solomon had played for me. The recording where Kenji laughed about how long it was taking me to die. I stepped closer to him. The officers tightened their grip, wary that he might lunge again, but I waved a hand. He was no threat to me now. You blame the debts. You blame the threats. But you had a choice, Kenji. You could have come to me. You could have told me the truth. I would have lost my fortune to save your life. I would have sold everything to pay your debts. Because that is what a father does. My voice broke slightly, the only crack in my armor. But you did not come to me for help. You came for my life. You decided that my death was easier than your honesty. You sold my love for money. Kenji sobbed, his knees buckling, held up only by the officers. Oto-san, please. I am your blood. I looked him deep in the eyes, searching for any trace of the son I once knew. I found none, only a stranger with my last name. I spoke one word, soft but heavy with finality, in the language we shared. Kuzuyaro. It means scum. It means trash. It is a word you do not use for family. But he was not family anymore. The word hung in the air like a physical weight. Kenji flinched as if I had spit in his face. He slumped forward, defeated. The officers nodded to me respectfully and began to march him out. Wait,
Kenji whispered as he passed me. What will happen to you? You are alone. I am not alone, I replied, my voice steady again. I have my dignity, and I have the truth. That is enough. They dragged him out the door. I listened to his footsteps fading down the hallway, the same hallway where he used to run as a child. I heard the heavy front door slam shut. I heard the car doors close. I heard the sirens wail one last time before they began to pull away, taking the poison out of my life. The room was suddenly very quiet. The police had taken the evidence, the photos, the vial, the recordings. The library was empty, save for me and Solomon. The old clock on the mantel ticked loudly, marking the passing of time. Tick, tock, tick, tock. I looked around at the empty chairs. The silence was not peaceful, yet. It was heavy. It was the silence of a battlefield after the fighting has stopped and the survivors are left to count the dead. I felt a hollow ache in my chest, a void where my family used to be. I had won. I had survived. I had kept my fortune and my life. But the cost was everything I had spent a lifetime building. Solomon walked over and placed a hand on my shoulder. He did not say a word. He didn't have to. He just squeezed my shoulder gently, a reminder that loyalty still existed, even if it didn't come from my own blood. I walked to the window and watched the convoy of police cars disappear down the long driveway, their red and blue lights reflecting off the wet pavement. It was over. The acting, the pretending, the fear. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool air of the room. It tasted bitter, but it also tasted like freedom. I was Harold again, not the deaf old man, not the victim, just Harold. I turned away from the window and looked at the empty room. It was time to clean up the mess. It was time to start over. And for the first time in a long time, the future was mine to decide. 3 months have passed since the flashing lights and the sirens faded into the night, leaving my home in a silence that felt both empty and heavy. The seasons have turned outside my window. The lush green of summer has given way to the fiery reds and deep oranges of autumn. I am sitting in the garden now. It is a traditional Japanese garden that my first wife, Akiko, designed 40 years ago. She used to say that a garden is a mirror of the soul. For a long time, my garden was neglected, full of weeds and shadowed corners, much like my life. But now the weeds are gone. The stone lanterns are clean. The koi fish swim lazily in the pond, their scales flashing gold in the afternoon sun. I am drinking tea. Not the bitter stuff Veronica used to force on me, but a high-grade sencha that tastes like grass and spring water. My health has returned. It is amazing what the human body can endure and how quickly it can heal once the poison of stress and betrayal is removed. I walk without my cane now. I stand tall. The trembling in my hands is gone, replaced by the steady grip of a man who has taken back the reins of his own destiny. But while my body has healed, my heart still carries the scars. They are the kind of scars that do not fade, but I have learned to wear them with a quiet sort of pride. They are proof that I survived. I received the final update from the district attorney yesterday. Veronica pleaded guilty. She realized that with the video evidence and the soil samples from the fern, she had no defense. She tried to cry in court. She tried to play the victim one last time, but the judge was not moved. She was sentenced to 20 years in a federal penitentiary for attempted murder and fraud.
I imagine her now in a cell, stripped of her designer clothes, her jewelry, and her pretenses. She wanted a life where she didn't have to work, where everything was given to her. In a cruel twist of irony, she got exactly that. She has a roof over her head and 3 meals a day provided by the state. She will have a long time to think about the difference between the price of things and the value of things. And then there is Kenji, my son, the boy I named after my own father. This is the part that keeps me awake at night, though I try not to let it show. He was not sent to prison here because of the nature of his crimes involving international money laundering and his dual citizenship. He was stripped of his American status and deported back to Japan. The authorities put him on a plane 2 weeks ago. But the law was not the punishment I feared for him. I learned through my old contacts that the Inagawa-kai were waiting for him at the airport in Okinawa. They are not men who forgive debts, and they are certainly not men who tolerate failure. I do not know exactly what has become of him, and I have decided not to ask. He wanted to embrace the dark side of our heritage. He wanted to play gangster with my money. Now, he belongs to that world entirely. It is a tragedy to lose a child, but I realized that I lost him long before the police took him away. I lost him to greed. I lost him to entitlement. So here I am, an old man in a big house. Many would think this is a lonely ending. They would think I am just waiting to die. But they would be wrong. I have never felt more alive. I looked at my bank accounts, which Kenji tried so hard to drain. The money is still there, but it no longer sits idle. Last month, Solomon and I launched the Shield of Honor Foundation. It is a legal defense and financial aid organization specifically for elderly veterans who have been victims of elder abuse and financial fraud. We hired a team of sharks, the best lawyers money can buy. But this time, they are hunting for the good guys. We are helping men like me, men who served their country only to be betrayed by their own blood. I go into the office every day. I read the case files. I meet with these men. I see the shame in their eyes, the same shame I felt. And I tell them my story. I tell them that being tricked does not make them stupid. It makes them human. I tell them that love is a blindfold that sometimes we have to tear off with our own hands. Seeing them get their dignity back, seeing them stand up to their abusers, gives me a purpose that I never found in the boardroom. People often look at the elderly and see only what is gone. They see the slow steps. They hear the soft voices. They see the wrinkled skin, and they assume that the fire has gone out. They think that old age is a time for resting and yielding, a time to sit in the corner and let the young wolves take over. But they forget something very important. The oldest wolf in the pack is not the one who is the fastest. He is not the one with the sharpest teeth. He is the one with the most scars. He is the one who has survived the harshest winters, the fiercest battles, and the longest famines. He has survived because he is patient, because he watches, because he knows when to strike. I was patient. I watched. And when the time came, I did not hesitate. I learned that you must never mistake silence for ignorance. You must never mistake kindness for weakness. And above all, you must never wake the beast sleeping inside a patient man. I lift the porcelain cup to my lips and take a slow, deliberate sip. The tea is warm and comforting. A gentle breeze blows through the garden, shaking a few red leaves from the maple tree. They drift down and land softly on the surface of the pond, causing ripples that spread out further and further until they touch the edge. My life is calm now. The storm has passed. I place the cup back on the saucer with a soft clink. I close my eyes and let the sun warm my face. I am Harold. I am a father who was betrayed. I am a husband who was deceived. But I am still standing, and I am finally free. This story teaches us a profound lesson about the nature of strength and the peril of underestimating the elderly. It reminds us that wisdom and experience are formidable weapons that should never be disregarded.
The characters in this tragedy learned too late that silence is not always submission, and that the unconditional love of a parent is not a license for abuse. It serves as a stark warning that greed can blind us to the true treasures of life, like loyalty and family, eventually leading to our own destruction. True power lies not in manipulation, but in dignity and the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for listening to this emotional journey. If Harold's strength inspired you, or if you believe in justice for those who have been wronged, please hit the like button and share this story with your friends and family. It helps more than you know. And I want to know from you. Do you think Kenji deserved his fate? Or was it too harsh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Until next time, stay strong and cherish the ones who truly love you. Goodbye.